Today we have with us Ashley Williams, who has an amazing story to tell. They started with owning a coffee farm in Honduras, and now they're also a roastery, and they own a nonprofit where they give back to the community of Honduras.
We went to Honduras. I went on mission trips for years, and always wanted to my goal was to go down there. And my Spanish was horrible, but I wanted to go down and learn Spanish. And I went down June of '98, and then a couple months after that, there was a hurricane. So I got to go back for 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. It was a pretty good little shot. And I really picked up Spanish and really loved being there. And so I kept going back on the mission trips. So then I made friends. And so I'd stayed at their house or stayed in a single men's dorm at the college and things like that. And so I just enjoyed that part of it. And then when I had two nickels to rub together, I just started going back on my own and doing stuff.
Okay, how did you go to Honduras? So first you went on a mission trip, right? And then how did you go back?
One of the doctors with the first group I went with, he was an eye doctor. He called me at 10 o'clock one night and said, I got 2 tickets for $400 each if you want to go to Honduras. And I'm like, sure, let's go. And so he and I went and did a two-man eyeglass team. And he had already had a clinic set up there. But I went into his clinic and learned how to use the auto refractor and those things so I could help him. So we did a dental clinic. And that was the actual time that I brought my bicycle. So I had a nice bicycle and I like riding. So I went out and broke my bike down and took it to Honduras. And so we're taking it out of the box. And my friend Rafael is there. He's trying to help me air the tire up. And he said, how much air do you want to put in it? And I said, 50 pounds. He said, well, you mean 15? I was like, no, I mean 50. Well, no, you got to mean 15 because a car has 30. So a bike can't have 50, And I'm like, just give me the air chuck. Just give me the hose. And so I didn't know it. But there was a woman or a young lady inside the nutrition building was listening to all this. And so she wrote in her journal that night, another arrogant North American arrived today that's going to be mean to the Honduran people.
Oh,
and so that was her impression of me. I don't know that it's changed after 21 years of marriage.
Hey, what?
But that's my wife, Julia.
No, I was gonna ask you how you met. That is the craziest story.
So she was there on a mission trip and I was there at the same time. But we got married like a year after that, a year and a half after that. It was pretty,
Wow.
So that worked out pretty good. And then we started having, we had our first child and we brought him down a time or two when he was younger. And then I got to go on a trip with just he and I when he was like 5. And so that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's cool memory.
I just enjoyed doing those things. We went and built a house for a lady. Her name was Paola. We built a house for her one time. And so Jonathan got to go with me on that trip. And so, yeah, just a lot of fun times and a lot of fun memories from just going and doing our own thing. We would stay in, house with a family and things like that.
Yeah. At what point did you guys end up moving like your family to Honduras?
Well, I like building the house. And I've always liked this saying, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach a man a fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. I've liked that saying. And in doing that, we built a house a couple times. I just got I had the idea because I have to go ahead of the trip and buy the land and sign all the papers and that stuff. And then I come back later on. And at the time I was doing it all myself. And so it was a whole lot cheaper if I didn't have to buy that land every time. So I had the idea to buy a big chunk of land, big enough to build 2 or 3 or 4 houses on. So we built Blanca a house, and it had a chunk of land on it. We fenced it all in because you have to do that when you buy land. And so I said, next year, I'm going to come back and build a house on the far end. And then the year after that, we'll build a house in the center. And so she said, well, can I use it as a garden until then? So I'm like, that sounds good. So I came back on another trip a few months later, and it was just plastered with vegetables. She had beans growing on the fence, just everything. And so I said, there's no way we can take that away from her. She's partially self-sufficient. And I said, so that just gave me another idea. So then I started looking for land big enough where everybody got a house and a piece of land that I could break into thirds, and they would have a big garden, and then we could get them some kind of an animal. Oh, wow. And I don't like pigs. I would never own a pig, but they don't seem like fun. But as a mission project, they have a lot of babies, and you can confine them easily in a smaller area. And so if you had a third of an acre, that pig would have a lot of room. And so that's what I decided to do. And so I was looking for land, and I bought this piece of land. It was 5 acres. And and we were met out there to look at it because I bought it sight unseen. The guy said, "No, it's a good land, and we clear it and build houses on it because you can build houses on almost anything."
Yeah.
And so we were out there, and everybody kept eating this fruit, and it was like these yellow berries. So I asked the guy, I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, try one." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going to try one."
I'll
So,
go with this first.
because I've tried one quite a few times in Honduras and it hasn't paid out well. And so I said, "What is it?" And he said, "It's coffee." I'm like, "Well, I'm not an idiot. This, black liquid is that's what coffee is." And he's like, "No, this is coffee." And he opened it up and said, "Here's a coffee bean." Again, not convincing. It looked like a peanut. I was like, have no idea what coffee's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And so he said, "I tell you what, my uncle is a roaster.
Mm.
So when you come back in December, I'll get you a bag of roasted coffee." To most people, I could pick up, and that's a bag of coffee. It's about that big.
Mhm.
Well, in farming terms, there's a sack, there's a bag, there's a carga. There's a lot of different terms that mean specific weight because a carga of coffee is a giant bag and has over 200 pounds in it.
Oh, wow.
And so when I came back, there was two. He had 100 pounds of roasted coffee. So there was two 50-pound bags of coffee waiting for me.
Oh, wow.
And so I duct taped a rope onto them, and that was my check bags coming back to the States. So I didn't really drink coffee at the time. I gave it to my mom. She loved it. Started giving it out to friends. But I'd spent so much money on the land, I knew I couldn't build a house for a while. So I said, well, let's just let this farm go, throw some fertilizer on it. And we found a guy that could manage it. And it was just 5 acres. And so let's just let it grow. It's not eating anything much. And we did that for a year or two. And I had a guy that was running our little business, and he'd worked for my dad and me combined for 24 years. And so I said, I can walk away from this, and we can go down there for a year and a half. And then after a year, he died.
Wow.
And
What
I
a
was like, "Oh
shock.
man!" And I remember I was standing out by this big tree when I was there when he was got the call on the farm. We went there for a year and a half, and then after 4 years, my wife had given up hope of coming back. And so the 5th, I moved officially to Honduras. We loaded everything we had, moved it into my office that I was, had, and everything else we put on the shipping container and sent it to Honduras.
Wow.
It didn't arrive until September, but Julia came on July the 19th. Eli turned 4 on July the 20th. So he was just a little guy.
Oh.
We had a house we stayed in for about a month and a half.
Mhm.
And then we moved into the house with no electricity, semi running water. The contractor was still working on the house. And we just moved into it, and we had a generator, a
Wow.
little bitty refrigerator. You could put about a gallon of milk and thing of mayonnaise in. That's about it.
Wow.
It was on the bottom of like a water cooler kind of thing. And so we lived in there with that, and we got a hot plate. And so you could unplug the little tiny fridge and hook in the hot plate, and and you do that. And we ran off generator power for about half the day. And that would be the time everybody ran in, plugged in their cell phones and things like that.
Mm.
It was 6 months probably before we had internet out there. That was a big night.
Yeah.
I made the guy make sure every device logged on before he left. And it was like 9 or 10 o'clock. He was out there hooking it up. Until then, you just got cell signal internet, And so at first there was no hot water. And we were in town one day, and we saw this really nice construction company. And I just pulled in and
Mhm.
walked around, and they had a 40-gallon hot water heater. And I said, "I want one." He's like, "Well, we don't have one. This is a demonstration." I said, "I really don't want to leave this building without that hot water heater." and,
Yeah.
so, and so I did not. And
Really?
so we hooked hot water, like real live hot water, up in the house.
Oh.
Yeah, it's definitely been some, you appreciate some of those little things. And one day we were taking our coffee into town, and we just sold it in the cherry, because coffee grows in what looks
Yeah.
like a grape or a cherry. And we were taking it raw product into the co-op, so to speak, and just selling it and leave.
Mhm.
And so I saw this. I just gotten a digital camera because I was big stuff in 2010. Or 2014 it was. I had my digital camera, and so I said, on the way back, there's this cool little mountain. I said, "I want to stop and take a picture of that." And he's like, "Okay." We did. Took a picture. Went back. 3 o'clock. It's time for a rest. So at
Mhm.
3 o'clock, this whole family, they took a nap. And
Mhm.
so the phone rang, and somebody said, "Is the gringo still looking for another farm?" And so the guy's like, yeah, I think so. He said, well, come pick me up and I'll go show you this farm. It was the exact spot that we'd stopped and taken a picture of an hour or two earlier.
Wow.
And that's what now is known as Eli Mountain. That's my son, Eli. And
That's
so
cool.
we looked at it for, just what you could look at it from that vantage point. And so that was January of 2014. I called Julia and said, get us 2 tickets for next month. Let's come look at this thing. So she and I flew out for like 5 days. She had to leave her baby at home, for 5 days. And we flew out to Honduras and walked the property. And I mean, it hadn't been used for 12, 15 years for
Mm.
anything. And so there was two guys in front of us, Nelson and Jason, and with machetes and cleaning the path, just like going through the jungle. You couldn't tell where
Wow.
you were. It was a little eerie sometimes. I mean, just grown. And so that was February. March, I flew back, signed the papers on it, and bought it. We got it, and it was just this huge place. And so we were there for 18 months, supposedly. And one thing sort of led to another. We were taking coffee to the co-op one day, and this one worker said, you have these drying patios, because it used to be a full process coffee farm. It had the mill on it to mill the coffee, but
Wow.
30 years ago, all that they'd shut it down.
Mm.
So there was no equipment. There was just the patio to dry the coffee on. And he said, well, why don't you dry your own coffee? He said, I know how to do that. And so I said, well, I don't know anything about it. Yeah, you just buy a machine, you dry the coffee. I'm like, okay. And so we drove like 6 hours and went and got a little bitty coffee mill that would fit in the back of my pickup. And so it was tiny. And so we tried some of it that first year because there was almost no coffee. So we milled it and played with it. And then it worked out okay. And so the second year, there was some more production. So I went and bought another machine just like that, the little one. And so we started milling a little more, but just in the back of the pickup. And then I built a platform and we mounted the machines on it and got a little more, progressive with it. And so then we sent it to a cupper that like cups it and gives you a score and all.
Okay.
And so once we did that, it just one thing led to another. And then, year three, 3.5, I'd, we were rolling pretty good. We were processing all the coffee. But with those two little machines, it was taking a while because you dumped it in with a bucket. So it's
Oh.
33 pounds in every bucket. And so the machine processes 1,200 pounds an hour. So it's something, and build up a little muscle doing the bucket, constantly for 5 or 6 hours, just nonstop. With the second machine, there was a second guy, and then that thing went faster than the first machine. And so you've got guys trying to fill buckets and feed them to you. So then eventually I said, we've got to do something a little more mechanical. We've got to get like an auger. And so when I started thinking about the auger and how are you going to do it, get it to both machines at the same time, and they have different rates. So then you buy a bigger machine, and then now we have our own wet mill. And so that means that the coffee is brought up the hill, you weigh it, you put it into a tank, you float it, and then the auger picks it up, takes it into the wet mill, drops it into the depulper, which takes the cherry off, and then sends it through different chutes. And so my son and I built all of that, and we
Wow.
just built it as we needed it and modified it as we needed it. So now our process is called seed to cup.
Okay.
So I start by programming that seed to be a seed and not to be a coffee bean, because God said this could be either one, but there's a
Oh,
process to make it one or the other. And
interesting.
so I tell it whether it's going to be, one or the other. And then according to which it either goes and processed and gets sent to the state, or it's processed and sent to the Ramada, Semiero first, and then the Ramada. So it becomes a seed, and then it gets planted in the nursery and becomes a plant.
Hmm.
And so from that point on, we just started doing everything ourselves. We grow our own plants. All the coffee is processed, dried, then reprocessed, dehulled, hand selected, put into a burlap sack and sent to the United States, which tomorrow morning it gets loaded into a truck in North Carolina. And
Hmm.
then so sometime during the night, tomorrow night, it'll arrive here at the house. And then I've got hopefully about 12 or 15 people coming to unload it. So this
Wow.
last year's entire crop that we grew, all the crop that we processed this year will arrive on Thursday.
Where are you located?
I'm in Mound Ridge, Kansas.
Kansas. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
We're going from North
And
Carolina to Kansas.
yep. And so it left my farm and went to the port of North Carolina, and then it got offloaded into another truck, and then they'll send it.
Which is like a good transition point to kind of ask you about how you got from that to your nonprofit. Because I see you guys are doing a lot of things for kids in Honduras and the community. Can you tell us like a little bit about that?
We saw that, we could build a house every year, but then for that amount of money, we could easily repair 50 houses.
Mm.
And then you see the need. We did a clinic out there one day, a medical clinic, and the doctor said that 80% or somewhere, I'm just making up a number, but about the majority of the kids had upper respiratory infections. And she said, we had enough antibiotics and everybody's good. They said in 90 days, it'll probably be back. And I said, well, why? And she said, because in the mountains, you guys put your stove in the house because they're wood burning adobe stoves.
Mm.
And in the cities where it's hotter and lower, they put them outside because it's in the house. There's smoke there all the time. And you look up at the ceiling and it's all charred and black. And my wife came up with the idea, well, why don't you just put chimney pipes in it? And I'm like, well, I didn't think about that, but that's an option. We could fix the problem. But it's so much easier to hand them antibiotics, but so we just had the idea. And then, so I said, well, how can I turn that into a business? Not for me, but so I got Santiago and Pedro are brothers. So now that's their business. So the farm or the nonprofit, just whoever happens to have the money at the time, will buy these chimney pipes, and Santiago and Pedro strap them to their bicycles. One of them puts a bag of cement in his backpack. The other one puts sand in his backpack, and they go to these houses. And
Wow.
everybody has a machete. So they'll literally put the houses in a cluster, and then they'll go and they'll cut down a little tree and they'll build a ladder right there on the spot.
Wow.
And then they climb up on the house. They install these chimneys. They concrete around the tin so it doesn't leak in. They
Mhm.
concrete it where it goes in the adobe stove. And
Mm.
so the nonprofit will pay these guys to go do that. So Saturday and Sunday, they when they're not working, they'll go and do those little jobs like that.
That's so cool.
And so that's something they can do. And it's not me handing them a food bag.
Mhm.
But we started just figuring out what the needs of the people were. The whole idea is I taught Anna how to do coffee exporting. She knows how to do the paperwork. So I die tomorrow, she can continue exporting her coffee, Santiago's, Pedro's, Melvin's,
Mm.
Bajidio, Santos. All those guys send their coffee to the US. If I die tomorrow, I don't want that to stop. So the idea is to have her be able to facilitate that. And Santiago and Pedro know what tools they need, and they can install those chimney pipes. Bajidio is pretty good at making home repairs, so he can go and do some concrete stuff. Santos is the same way. So these guys can do that and make a little money on the side. But at
Mm.
some point, I'm going to be out of the picture, and they can carry all that on. So that's hopefully Legacy Farms was the name we came up because we want to leave some kind of a legacy that
I see.
we're not just building house once a year and then that's it. We help one family a lot. We're seeing to the needs of a lot of people.
For those people who are like listening now, is there a way that they can help you guys out, that they can donate, or is there some way to kind of help this legacy continue?
Well, as far as the Legacy Farms part goes, buy coffee, legacyfarmscoffee.com. But as far as the nonprofit, it's lfmissions.org.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a donate button there. On the bigger things, I've got a children's library, and
Okay.
currently it's only open on Saturdays. But we hired a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and so she's going to start working in the afternoons, doing an after-school program. So we've got a couple laptops. And so what we're trying to do is get some Sunday school classes that would come in and pay for a day once a month, 2 or 3 days a month, or pay for the whole thing if they want. And just pay Dilmia's salary so that she can come in and do the after, because she's smart as a whip,
Mm.
smarter than I am probably. And so to have her come in and help with homework in the afternoons, and we
Yeah.
have Wi-Fi in the library now. We bought a color printer so the kids can come in for their homework assignments and they can use
Mm.
the printer for that. And so Dilmy knows how to do all that stuff already. So she's going to start an after school program. and we have a children's church on Sundays.
Mhm.
Well, it was a children's church, and then a lot of the adults started asking if they could come. And so right now we're just doing donations for the. We've got too many kids for our area, so we're building a second classroom. And everything I build is multi-use. So every building I build has a chain hanging out of the wall every 6 feet, and that's to hang a hammock. So when you and your husband come,
Oh.
we're gonna separate you. So you got his hammock, and then you'll have one right next to you, or we can put them in a different room if you need a vacation. But pretty lukewarm water most of the time. So.
Yeah, we'd love to. In fact, like our mission is rejoice and do good. I have like this shirt on. We want to in the future like create a whole community, and we want to do stuff like that, like go volunteer and do missions, but not do missions like you were saying earlier where it's like vacation. No, like pull up your sleeves and work hard and do what they need help with. So it's cool to have someone who's already there and you know what they need. So in the future, if you ever need some volunteers, hopefully we can provide that.
If you come to our place and do a mission, we're going to have one night where we go out and we all get cleaned up and we'll go out and dress up and, not dress up, but, uh, we're going to enjoy ourselves. But the rest of the time, you're going to either be sleeping in a hammock or on the floor in a sleeping bag. And we have lukewarm water, most of the nights, for your shower and things like that. But it's very basic. And I want you to spend as much time as possible with the people. Now, I don't care if you don't have one word of Spanish. If you don't know any Spanish at all, you can get a coloring book and play with a kid. There's a lot of language that doesn't need to be spoken, and just caring says a lot. But we're building everything so that you can stay on the farm. There's tons of walking trails on the farm. There's a 45-foot waterfall on the farm.
Whoa,
And
didn't
just
expect
it goes
that.
into this little pool that's probably 40 by 30, and you can jump in and swim, and literally you can walk out of the pool, and walk into the river. And so it's just a great little area, and it's safe as long as you don't cross a fence. You're in the farm, and it seems massive when you say it's 54 acres. It seems
Yeah.
massive compared to what the 54 acres sounds like, because you can just walk and walk and walk. If you want to just come up with your family, there's some little projects you can do and just enjoy the farm. But the apartment has a tiny coffee roaster. It has a V60 and a French press and all those things in it,
That's
and
all we need.
just enjoy coffee and enjoy the view.
That's all we need.
That's all
Well,
you
it's so
need.
nice. Yeah. It's so nice talking to you. Thank you for coming on to this podcast.
All right. No, if you have any more questions, just shoot them to me and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Have a good day.
You too.